Hi, our only guest today is Josh Lioce, who's a realtor in the greater Milford area. And Josh, we want to talk to you about the real estate market. It's, no secret that the real estate market basically cratered across the country with the Great Recession. And are we out of it in the Milford area?
I think that you're starting to climb out of it. We saw 2013 was such a great year for us. We came out of a very slow 5-year hole. And 2013 was just pent-up demand, and it was just crazy. It was hot. The market was flying. It was our record-breaking year for us personally and from a company standpoint. You saw the January and February of 2014 with the polar vortex be almost a stall in the marketplace. Literally one of the worst January, Februarys recorded in real estate history, at least in the New England area. And then it really kicked back into the springtime and caught up, and we've had another great year. Not as good as 2013 in the sense of probably overall transactions, but the average number of, the average sale price has gone up slightly, which is really good to see. And we're very close to hitting the same kind of numbers in the sense of solds. So I think you're going to continue to see this growth, and I think a key in what 2015 is going to look like is really, how strong is the economy going to be? Are the job numbers going to start growing, and not the $10 an hour job numbers? I'm talking about the mid-range and higher level $150,000 a year employment numbers. And are those jobs going to start growing? Are the rates going to stay low and kind of continue to drive that first-time home buyer marketplace that now the rates are back down to 3.5 right now, 3.65, which they were hovering at the beginning of the year around 4.5%. So I think we're climbing out of it. I think it's going in the right direction, but there's still a lot of what ifs and a lot of questions to be answered moving forward.
Yeah, for the people who saw their homes, the value of their homes drop by thousands.
Sure.
They ever going to see that number come back up?
A lot of people, when I talk about this, they're like, oh, well, we're never going to see those numbers again. And that's not, I think, the truth. I think the truth is that we will see those numbers again. It is going to take some time. The crash that happened and the amount of money we lost in the marketplace and what rates did and where everything went was so large scale that it's not going to be like a quick, okay, well, this is going to, 2 years, we're going to all climb out of it. We've seen some great gains nationally, that some of the gains in some of these areas were 20, 30%, and they were worried about another bubble happening. In our area, it's more of a modest growth. You've seen probably about a 5% gain since the bottoming out of the marketplace. So you've seen some things starting to come back. Are they going to come back to where they were in 2003 and 2004? Sure, absolutely. It may be in 10 years. But those numbers will be...
To be honest, I thought some of those numbers at that time frame were a little bit high for the location of the property.
Sure. I mean, when we would sell, for example, a split in Milford, the average split right now, and I'm being very generic and gray here, but the average split in Milford is probably going to go for about $275,000. We were selling that house for $400,000. And that was excessive. And we even in the realtor community, even agents in Milford who know each other and we're on caravans, you start to say, oh my God, when are these numbers going to stop? And it had to. It got out of hand too quick, and there's a gajillion reasons why that happened, and we all have probably talked about them 100 times over. But I think what we're hopeful that we're going to see is that controlled growth continues. So we don't want a 10% or 15% gain year. We want the 3 to 4%, 5% is great, but something controlled and slow and steady where you're going to just see it have gains and you're not going to see anything have these big drops and these big gains and these big drops. You want controlled growth, and a lot of that is the economy, the jobs, and where the rates are going to go.
There was a lot of hope on the casino issue because there were a lot of jobs that were going to come with that. Now that's dropped off.
Yep.
Have you seen that? Did that have an impact? Do you see a bubble there and it dropped?
I saw a lot of panic, and I saw a lot of hope, and I saw very different sides of the spectrum. And unfortunately, I think that's just people in general. It's very reactionary, and no one's really going to take their time to educate the goods and the bads, or even hear the other side out. They either were really passionate for it, or they did not want it. I had people calling saying, "I'm moving if this comes to town." So I didn't see any real effect in the sense of what happened in the marketplace. What we saw was fear and excitement on very high levels, and no in between. But it really didn't affect the market or our pendings or potential sales.
Is there any spot in Milford that's growing quicker than any other spot, or is it?
No, I think we're talking off the camera earlier about Walden Woods. That community, that townhouse condo style community, has it's its own little animal where it's located, and it's done very well. And I think it's almost sold out. But that
Yeah, I
is,
mean, and he was barely hanging on during the height of this recession.
yeah, it's just a very different price point than what we're used to seeing in Milford. So, but they've done very well. Outside of that, there's not a ton of new construction in Milford. There is some. There's the builders who have still quite a bit of land who will continue to build and do very well. But there's not a tremendous amount of new construction. So a lot of what you see is the resale market, which is very strong. Milford has always had kind of had better outcomes compared to the surrounding towns when things were good or bad. So it's just one of those communities that stays pretty steady when things are one way or the other.
Real good consistent growth, but
Yeah.
not too much.
Yeah,
Have we gone through most of the foreclosure stock? I know at one point people were concerned that there's all these unoccupied homes that the banks own.
Yep.
And the talk was, well, they have to get cleared out before the real estate market's going to get cleaned up.
the shadow
And-
inventory. And
Right.
Yeah, you might have had 100 of those homes sitting there. Is that pretty much gone?
I think that there's still some of it out there, and
Yeah.
there'll always, I think, be a piece that it may never come on. Not sure what's going to happen with some of these houses, but we're talking a very small segment of the marketplace.
Well, there always were one or two or three
Yeah.
at any given time.
Yeah, and I think
But,
you-
we went up to the 50 and 60. And
we had a lot, and when we had 30% of our sales, I think in 08 or 09 were distressed properties. That's a tremendous number. I mean, that is just something we had never seen before, and we had to really stay ahead of being prepared for that. What you see now is onesie, twosie short sales, onesie, twosie foreclosures. A lot of the things that are kind of out there sitting are things that have been tied up in title issues or legalities based on that whole legal foreclosure piece that you heard about. And banks are either just sitting back and saying, we're not even going to do anything until we figure out all the other stuff we're working on, or who knows what they're going to do with it. Short sales right now, you're seeing less and less banks wanting to work with short sales. They worked so hard for so long to kind of get these things through, even though
Yeah.
I won't say it was easy. It was a heck of a struggle. But you see less and less banks wanting to continue down that road. They're starting to make things a little bit more difficult for the people who are still in those situations, who still may be needing to do that short sale. So,
Well, there's still properties that, I mean, there are a lot of properties that that were foreclosed. People just walked away from.
Yeah.
And they're still sitting there empty.
yep. I'm sure you drive by, properties in your communities and our
Right,
communities. It's
right.
like, oh, geez, that's been vacant for some time.
And being on the Board of Health, that creates a whole
Sure.
another issue, which forces people to forces us to send letters to the mortgage holders that they got to do something about the property, and it becomes real issues in town if they go empty for very long.
Sure.
And then kids break into them. And
You have the whole copper thing, the whole
Oh, right.
scaling up copper
Oh,
pipes,
right.
and you've seen some of the cities, in some of the areas closer to Boston, they've made mandates. Towns have made mandates for these banks and mortgage holders that they have to do certain things. But I know it's been fought kind of across the board in regards to letting the towns have the power, not
Right.
being a statewide mandate.
It's been very difficult.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Very
it has.
difficult.
Another source of housing stock is in Milford. You've had a couple of developments that were approved by the planning board but never built, and now we're starting to see onesie twosie houses go in them.
Sure.
So you have at the top of Central Street, you have or along Beaver, some of Dominic Afonso's, and then the planning board just approved, I think, 30-home extension to Field Pond. Although we probably won't see any building there for a year. So there is resurgence
Sure.
in that regard.
Sure, I think what you're seeing is some confidence in the builders. The builders have confidence that things are heading in the right direction, and any town wants to see new construction and housing keeping up with demand.
New growth is important, and from the tax standpoint
Just
too.
from the tax base, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think, towns want to see the growth. Milford is very, I won't say it's very rare, but for our area, it's just not a town that still has a lot of big open tracts of land left. So the things that you're going to see are maybe secondary or pieces that were on the back burner just because maybe they weren't in the forefront of the builder's mind or in the best possible location. But as the town grows and things expand and we have the outreach far out to Beaver Street and Central Street and that whole area that Mr. Fonzo developed, that area is now sought after. People want to be in that South Central neighborhood. It's a nice area, it's a good area, and it's close for commuters. So there's all these pieces coming back, and hopefully it's going to bring in some nice new fresh inventory and have new construction available in town where there's just not that much. So it's good to see.
As I said, new growth is extremely important in the communities because that's outside the Prop 2.5.
Yep.
So when new growth comes in, that's tax dollars that can go into the bucket that you don't have the Prop 2.5 issue.
Dealing with the override piece.
Right.
And I think nationwide, we follow the stat, I don't know locally, but nationwide, we're very behind on housing for citizens and people who can qualify to buy housing. We're behind. Immigration is a whole other issue, but depending on what happens with how that process goes and how many more people are going to be looking for housing, we're going to be even more behind than that. So as the baby boomer generation starts to get out of housing, you have this whole nother generation coming up that really hasn't got into the marketplace, the millennials.
At all.
They're not in the marketplace yet. And if you look statistically nationwide, the first time home buyer age actually for the first time was over 30 this past year.
Really?
So that stat came out from Keeping Current Matters, and I believe it was from Real Trends. I'm not 100% sure. Don't quote me on that. But for the first time, the average first-time home buyer was 31 years old, over 30. And that just goes to show you we're going to have this continued pent-up demand until these younger millennials are getting into the job force and getting more secure and getting out of mom and dad's basement. Because I know a lot of them who still just can't make the move.
Right, well, I was going to say, for one, a lot of them couldn't find a job in the recession. A lot of them are carrying exorbitant amounts of college
Tremendous
debt.
yeah.
They're postponing marriage,
Yeah.
and they just get, you've got economic factors working against them. And in the wake of the recession, the banks will give us 10, 20% down on a house.
Right.
They don't have it.
Right.
Well, that's one of the things that's
And I would say
changed.
sorry, Al, but I would say the parents don't have it to lend them or give it to them either.
That's one of the things that's changed. Now, what you're going to see shortly or soon is you're going to see veterans beginning to jump in the marketplace where they can borrow on VA benefits 100%. They don't have to come up with a down
Correct.
payment.
No PMI.
No payment. So what's going to happen is you're going to see those guys when we start to wind down this and those guys come back. That's a marketplace that's going to open up, and you're going to see first-time or home buyers to begin to jump in that fray.
Sure.
Because they're in the right age group.
Yep.
I mean, that's what's going to happen.
It's going to be a nice piece of it, and you want them to come back and take advantage of those benefits. They're
Right.
unbelievable. One of the things we're trying to get out to millennials to talk about is that many of them kind of have this preconceived notion that you need 20% or you need 10%. There are tremendous programs out there, specifically mass housing, which you can buy a house with 5% down and get lender-paid PMI. There is no PMI. So your entire payment is going to be, the mortgage piece of it is going to be deductible for interest. So you don't have to have the 10 or 20%, and when you look at renting versus buying, it's one of the things we're trying to show people. And listen, some people need to rent, some people are better off renting, depends on their situation, their job, their lifestyle. But those people who want to own and are waiting to own, right now it's imperative that they do start looking at those rental numbers because the rental market is hot and the numbers are going up. And for what you can buy and what you really truly need, you might be in a better position. So we're trying to get people a little bit more educated, and again, a lot of them they're a little trigger shy, okay? They're a little gun shy because they just went through some real tough times with mom and dad and saw mom and dad lose a house or go through a short sale or struggle to get through that recession. So a lot of them not only are maybe not financially in position, but aren't mentally sure that they want to do it because what they just experienced is pretty powerful in a negative way.
Right. I mean, essentially, what you see now is a generation that's experienced the downside of home buying,
Right.
and so now their experience is one that's a negative one. Up until this, is always buy next. The other thing that I've noticed is up until the bottom fell out, the real estate agents were selling, if you're breathing hard, we're going to sell you a house.
Right.
And what's happened now, it's forced the real estate agents or real estate people to be more into training, more into servicing their client
Right.
in an honest way. So that client knows what they can afford and what they can't afford, and also pricing a house in a more realistic way.
Correct.
Which has been a good thing for
Yeah.
for agents.
For our industry.
For the industry, it's been very positive that, because what happened is people got fat, dumb, and happy, and it was
Yep.
a no-brainer. And now this has forced people to improve their sales skills and their customer service skills as opposed to just selling boxes.
And understand real estate. For so long
Right.
they were order takers, and when I got into the industry in the late 1990s, early 2000s, it wasn't there yet, and we had nothing but training and old school training. So I got the best of both worlds. I got to see really what some of the people who had gone before me had to go through to dialing for dollars, as they used to call it,
Right.
and cold calling, to really understanding how crazy a market can get, now to really understanding that it's all about service and it's all about relationships, and this isn't a business that you get a license and you just go out there and things happen. You have to be educated in the marketplace, you have to be educated in real estate, understand a little bit of economics, and know how to forge a relationship. And those are all very important factors if you want to be successful in this business and help your clients and your consumers.
Well, it's good. From my standpoint, it's good to see that the real estate marketplace has caught up with large-scale commercial, large-scale industrial sales.
Sure.
Large capital equipment sales.
Yeah.
Because I spent a lot of years in that business,
Yeah.
and that was based on relationships. You didn't go walk in and sell something like that.
No.
It took time to develop a relationship so your client trusted you, and you became an advisor, a counselor, someone who didn't sell a box to them because of features. You sold a benefit to that customer.
Right.
And you understand what they need, and you begin to understand what they really need.
Sure.
And sometimes rental is the thing to
Is
do.
the way to go, yeah.
And I understand that you do a lot. You handle a lot of rental stuff too.
My lovely wife does.
Yes,
Mrs. Lioce, yes.
Mrs. Lioce handles it.
Julie runs our rental division.
So what happens is you really are full service.
Yes, we are.
Complete, because a lot of times you go to a real estate agency and you say, well, I don't know if I want to buy, I want to rent, and they go, ooh, I don't
Right,
deal
you
with
gotta go
rental.
somewhere else, yeah.
And in your case, you really into supplying people a place to live.
Absolutely.
Which is a good segue, because we were talking about home ownership up till now. Milford has a very large number of rental units
Yes.
and complexes compared to, an Upton or a Mendon or even a Bellingham.
Correct.
How's that market going right now?
Market is very busy. The rental market has really heated up, and I think usually when you see the real estate market so healthy in the sense of sales and purchases, you see the rental market start to flatten a little bit.
Drop.
And you really didn't see that last year, and you haven't seen it this year. I'm seeing really the same number of units and growth in numbers in regards to asking price for monthly rent. You'll see it probably start to flatten out now because of the season we're coming into. But I think because of so many people were getting out of short sales and foreclosures for so long, they're still out there renting. And I think part of the market that we're going to start to see come back as not first-time buyers, but first-time again buyers. They've gotten out of house, they've been out for 3 to 5 years.
And now they want to.
Now they want to get back into the marketplace. They want to enjoy what they didn't get to enjoy the same way before, and they know that they're still buying low and rates are still good. So I think you'll see that piece of the people who are renting start to get back out there and buy. But the rental market in Milford is tremendous. Julie, my poor wife, is crazy busy. She's really one of the only ones who do it in the area. There's a few agents that do it, but it's such a different part of real estate.
Oh, right, absolutely.
I don't do it. I don't understand it. I couldn't even tell you the first thing about it. I know that her process is even more strenuous than buying a house is. So it's just very, very different. And she specializes in it, and she loves it, and she does very well.
She's good at it.
I don't know why she likes it so much, but she loves it. It's crazy. It's intense. It's a lot of things happening in a short amount of time.
Is there a segment of the rental market that's missing in Milford? We know we have low end, we know we have medium end.
I think what you
What
don't
are we
see a
missing?
lot of is the single-family home rentals. They're few and far between, mainly because you start to get to that single-family home price point, so 18 to up, okay?
Yeah.
And people will start to say,
For that money, I can buy one
Exactly.
for the
So
same money.
you start to get a smaller demographic of people looking at it, because now you're looking at a much higher number in the sense of what the rent is going to be. And you start to see more and more people who have the ability to purchase, prefer to purchase.
So that puts, a house that sells for $200 to $275,000 is at that spot.
Yeah.
Where I got a
Yeah,
choice, I can rent it, or I could buy that house and be in the same spot.
Yeah, I
Correct.
can't see paying $2,000 a month rent
Correct.
when for a little more or a little less, you can get a starter home and get that mortgage tax deduction.
A lot of the times it's going to be a little less, and it's going to be very similar, if not the same home. That's why the high-end market of rentals is just not there. You'll see it in parts of the city. You see rentals, right now the rental market in the city is off the wall. I was just talking to an agent who was out there who was renting one-bedroom condos, nothing fancy, studio basic condos, for $3,000 a month, and some of the mid-range stuff for $500 to $5,500. That's a tremendous amount of money that you can
You
own
know, I
something
grew up in
with.
the greater New York City area, and that amount you mentioned was, being charged 20, 30, 40 years ago
Right.
for a shoebox.
Right.
But people pay that. But,
Sure.
out here, now we have a lot of multifamilies in Milford, and a lot of, triple deckers or doubles, whatever you want to call them.
Sure.
So that market pretty much satisfied, or?
In the sense of the rental piece of it,
Yeah,
or the multifamily
the
market
rental.
in the South? I think the rental market is that's where the sweet spot in Milford is. There's a lot of two-bedroom type units that are in half duplexes, or two-family
Yeah.
up and downs, or three families. And there's some beautiful properties out there. There's some spaces that are well taken care of. Landlords have pride in ownership even in their rental properties. And that's what you want to see. You want to see people who, if they're going to own rental property, they take care of it, and they have a nice product, and they want good tenants, and they want tenants who have a little pride in their
And who wanna
residency.
stay.
And who want to stay.
Yeah, now the high-end stuff, the stuff that's $2,000 or $3,000 a month, that's someone who's waiting for a house to be completed. That's the guy who's going to rent that. He's not going to have a long-term lease. He's going to have a 6-month lease or a 3-month lease or whatever, waiting for his house to be built.
Yep. Or a corporate person who came
Corporate
in
who's
short
here for
term.
short-term and knows that and doesn't want to buy, he's going to lease.
Correct.
So, but there aren't a lot of those kind of people around.
Correct.
So that's why that marketplace, I would guess, is why that marketplace is.
Yeah, and I think when you saw a lot more relocation coming in 10 years ago from the EMCs of the world, and when Waters was in a big growth phase, which you still see a little bit, but nothing like it was. You had a lot more of those people renting single families or splits, and especially that South Street, Purchase Street neighborhood area.
Yeah.
You just don't see that as much anymore, just because the relos are not quite there.
Well, that's one of the things one of the things that needs to happen here is that industry, the high-end industry, the people, those people who are high-end managers, high-end executives moving into this area. That's when this was a system integration area where there were a lot of computer integrators here. That was a great thing, but that's gone away. So now you have the medical industry that's coming in.
Right.
And that will afford, I think, those same kind of people coming back into this area.
Well, and that's the hope. I mean, it goes back to what we were talking about that the jobs coming back, and you want to see those $150,000 to $200,000, jobs being created or coming back into the state, or who knows, but getting those into our area or in the state of Massachusetts. I think that's what that's what's really missing. And I think that's going to drive the middle market that's still soft. That $300,000 to $500,000 marketplace. I shouldn't even say three, it's more $400,000 to $550,000 marketplace, where you want that person to be able to buy that house so those people can either move up
Or move
down.
Move down, yeah, because now what you see is a lot of, as you say, baby boomers beginning to think about downsizing.
Oh, yeah.
And that's bringing a lot of houses on the marketplace. They're downsizing. The good news is that they're looking for a smaller place.
Correct.
The bad news is it puts more inventory at the high end.
Correct.
Which is going to drop the price at the high end.
Well, I would argue the other bad news is there's not enough of the downsized units.
Well, that's
for
the other
those
piece of the
homes.
puzzle.
I was just going to say it after.
I think
I'll
that's
finish
why
this
Walden
point.
Woods appealed to so many people.
I think so too, and I think that if someone could, build a development of comfortably sized ranch homes, I think they'd hit a gold mine. But builders don't want to build them because they're very expensive. It's more expensive to build a ranch than to go up with sticks. So you're talking more concrete, more
Well, that's
area.
it. It's cheaper to go up than it
People
is to
think
go
it's more
down.
expensive
But
than
the
yes, it
world
really
is going to want, and the elder generation is going to want, a
One floor.
one-story
Absolutely.
house.
When we were working in Douglas and we were working on a subdivision up until about a year ago, we had 5 or 6 colonials available to build. And we sold 2 out of the 12 we sold, and the rest were all ranch homes.
Right.
Custom built, some of the plans that the builder had. Nobody came in and said, I want a big, glorious colonial. And most of the people we sold to were in the 50-plus age range. And they said, I want a ranch. And they built very nice, modest, but very nice 16 to 1,800 square foot ranches that you think, geez, that's not a lot of square footage. Well, when you put it on one floor and you only need 2 or 3 bedrooms, man, you can have a beautiful home with all the amenities that you need.
Right.
Or at the very least, a modern house with a master on the first floor.
Right.
And
Guest
once the
rooms
kids are
upstairs.
grown, guest rooms upstairs.
I think you'll see a little bit of that. I think the problem with builders and the speculation of this generation and how long this piece is going to last is that they're afraid to overbuild that segment of the population, because then it will start to shrink down. But I do think that there is a need there that no one's quite figured out how to fill.
The other.
My take on that is, okay, you're going to have the baby boom is going to peak around 2030, 24, somewhere between 2030 and 40. It's going to go right down. As the bulge moves through the snake, that image, and the people die off. I hate to say that, but let's say you build those homes, you got an excellent market for starter homes then.
Well, the other thing that's happening too is you have in-law apartments, houses that people have built. They have the house and they have an in-law apartment on it. And what's going to happen as time goes on, those kids are going to say, "Gee, I got to take care of my parents. So, what kind of in-law apartment do you have?"
Right.
So, I suspect that in the next few years, the house that has that 1-bedroom in-law apartment that's 1,000 square foot attached to it is going to be something that people are going to start looking for.
Yeah, and that's another segment that it's very hard to find a house. It's very hard to have someone come to me and say, I need an in-law, a really nice in-law. They're impossible to find, and when they come on, there are 10 other people looking for them, or there's nobody looking for them. So
Or you have to add it onto the home.
or you have to
house.
add it onto your home, and I think because people are living longer, and because the generations before us are not dying off at 50 or 60 like that, most of the population are living into their 70s, comfortably into their 80s. My grandparents are still living in their home that they built 15 years ago, and they're 86 and 85, and on their own with all their faculties. I think you'll start seeing more and more of that, to a point where people are going to start saying, hey, we need to reintroduce the combined living, and we need to have mom stay at home for a few years, and we need to bring mom and dad back, or whatever.
And it's got to be, that in-law apartment has got to be built so everything is on one floor.
Right.
The kitchen, the bedroom, the living room, all that stuff, the laundry, everything on one floor. So, it is equipped for somebody and has sensitivity to handicapped accessibility. Doesn't necessarily have to be built totally handicapped accessible, but with a sensitivity to.
With the 3-foot openings and
Right.
3.5-foot openings,
Right.
There's got to be some forethought into it. And I think someone who does, a lot of people who build them don't think about, and you shouldn't, because you're building a home for your use. You're not always worried about resale, but as a realtor, you're always thinking about the impact. When you build some of these homes that have these in-law suites in them, or these in-law apartments, you need to make sure that when you're done with the in-law, whether that's because they go into assisted living or whatever the case may be, it can be introduced to another use fairly easily. Because what happens is people get stuck with these overbuilt properties, and they just can't
Right.
figure out what to do with them after the fact.
Right. So Josh, we're running out of time. Could you sort of sum up the state of today's market?
The state of today's market is we're heading in the right direction. And I think that once we get through this election, and once we get into the spring of next year, that we're going to see a continuation of positive movement in the marketplace. And I think things are going to keep going in the right direction.
And is there enough housing for all different segments of the market? In Milford, the starters, the elders?
No, I think inventory is on the lower end right now. So we need more inventory. And that's across the board.
Okay.
Well, thank
Hey,
you.
thanks for
My
coming
pleasure.
in. Give
Thanks
us
for
an
having me,
update.
guys.